Meeting to order. First order of business is roll call.
Bill Slayton.
Here.
Rob Feckner.
Morning.
Good morning. Margaret Brown. Here. Dana Hollinger. Here. Henry Jones.
Here.
Fiona Ma.
She's here.
David Miller.
Here.
Irena Ortega.
Here.
Jason Perez.
Here.
Ramon Rubalcava.
Here.
Mona Pascal Rogers. Here. Teresa Taylor.
Here.
And Betty, represented by Lynn Paquin. Karen Greenhouse, excuse me.
All right, thank you very much. Apologize to the audience for the slight delay, but it was picture day here. And I hope everybody is enjoying tax day today as well. All right, we'll move to approval of the April 15th, 2019 Investment Committee timed agenda. Do I have a motion?
Second.
Motion from Brown and second from Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we'll move to the Pledge of Allegiance, and I've asked Henry Jones to lead us. Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, next item on the agenda is the executive report. For that, I call on our Chief Investment Officer, Ben Meng. Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Investment Committee. Ben Meng, Chief Investment Officer. So today we have two agenda items in the morning. One is an action item. It's about Assembly Bill 1320, the divestment bill from Turkish investment vehicles. And then that's item 7A. Then item 7B, the investment staff will lead a discussion on the review of co-investment activities in private equity. I also would like to take this opportunity this morning to give you a quick overview of the economy, the capital market, and the portfolio as my first quarterly report as the new Chief Investment Officer. As you know, that this economic recovery is on its way to become the longest economic recovery in history. We know that the economy does not die of old age. However, it does not take a lot to trip up a 100-year-old man. So we need to be very mindful of where we are in terms of the economic cycle. So speaking of the economy, the growth of the economy, last year in 2008, in the United States, we delivered a GDP north of 3%. However, with the tailwind of the fiscal stimulus in the recent past, with the tailwind of that behind us, is the economic growth of the 3+% of growth that we saw last year is unlikely to repeat in the future. As a matter of fact, that most people, the consensus forecast of the GDP of 2019 is slightly over 2%, and the consensus forecast for 2020, the GDP is sub 2%. So that is the overall the economy. And speaking of the labor market in the United States, as you know, is really tight. Last November, we saw a print of unemployment rate of 3.7%, and that is the lowest we have seen since 1969. The wage growth is strong. Both nominal wage growth and the real wage growth has been strong. They are either at or close to cyclical heights. So the tight labor market really points to that we are in the late part of the economic cycle. However, the tight labor market and the wage growth have not translated into high inflation yet, which one would expect to see in a late part of the economic cycle. There are a number of hypotheses explaining the lack of the missing of inflation, such as the advancement, the increase in productivity due to the advancement in technological innovations, the missing inflation because of globalization, and also some argue that there's measurement challenges. How do we measure inflation in the new economy? So we don't see high inflation yet. On the household side, the consumer side, the household balance sheet is strong and consumer confidence is high, mainly thanks to, again, to the tight labor market and wage increases. However, a consumer rebound can face challenge if the trade dispute is not resolved favorably. On the business front, the business confidence is high as well, and the pace of capex is healthy. However, the business is facing headwinds of profitability. Again, given the tax cut, the tailwind or the effect of the tax cut, most of them has faded, and plus the unresolved trade dispute which impact the business demand and the business confidence. And more importantly, with rising wages, without the accompanying rise of inflation and the pricing power, will put pressure on the corporate profitability going forward. So this is on the business side. So we talk about the economy, the growth, is unlikely to repeat the high growth we saw in 2008. The labor market is very strong, indicating late cycle, but inflation is still manageable, so which that gave the Fed some room, flexibility in terms of continue to be accommodative. And the consumer sector is healthy, the business sector is healthy. So do we see any major risks or imbalances in the economy? So since the end of last year, the Fed started publishing the semi-annual financial stability review report. So in that report, in addition to the traditional dual mandate of the Fed, which is maximize employment and maintain price stability. So in addition to this traditional dual mandate of the Fed started talking about leverage and asset valuations of financial assets. So in the recent Fed meeting minutes, it mentioned, Fed does see pockets of leverage risk, particularly in non-bank corporates. And also in the recent past, the Fed also mentioned the leverage in certain pocket of a commercial real estate is high. However, we do not see that leverage risk, it hasn't yet amount to imminent systematic stress event yet, but we're very mindful and we're closely monitoring the leverage build up in the system. The other risk the Fed mentioned is the valuation for asset classes. And as we know that valuation in the long run really matters, particularly for us as a long-term investor. And the two major asset classes or risk segments in our portfolio is public equity, or the growth part, with the public equity plus private equity. That is about 60% of the asset. I won't say probably 80% of the risk in the portfolio. And then the other major asset class is really fixed income, or we call this income segment. So for these two major asset classes in our portfolio, for their individual valuation, it's not as at the highest, or it's not at the richest point in history. So if you look at the individual asset class by itself. However, if you put them together as a portfolio, we call the 60-40 portfolio, roughly 60% in equity, 40% in the income component. The combination of the portfolio, the valuation of that, it is at historically speaking, very high level, which does not bode well for the future returns of our portfolio. That also highlights the importance of diversification, because in the past, when you have two major asset classes in the portfolio, when one is richly valued, the other one is not so. So you get a diversification effect. But now the combination of the 60-40 portfolio, the valuation of that is quite high. So again, as I said, it does not bode very well for the future return of the portfolio. The other risks that recently surfaced and caused a lot of people's concern, about the recession may be coming, is the inversion of the yield curve, which happened in March. So when we say the inversion of the yield curve, so normally the interest rate curve, the long end, the long maturity, say for example the 10-year yield, should be higher than the front end of the interest rate curve, say the 3 months T-bill or the Fed fund futures. And in March, the curve inverted. And the most monitored metrics of that is the 10-year yield and the 3-month T-bill. So with the 10-year yield is below the 3-month T-bill, that's what we call the inversion of the yield curve. And normally, when that happens, on average, a year after that, recession happens. But the inversion, in my personal opinion, in March, the inversion of the yield curve is really because of the dovish stand from the Fed. And the Fed adopted more dovish stand in March. Is really main reflection of their concern of the lack of inflation, plus the unsettled uncertainty from trade and the slowdown of external demand. So that is a risk that a lot of people talk about, the inversion of yield curve. And there's another risk people talked a lot, more concerned, particularly at the end of last year, was the monetary policy, global monetary policy. Would Fed and central bank of other countries, would they make a monetary policy mistake and to upset the economy, the recovery of the economy? So that was very legit concern back into Q4 of last year. But since then, we have seen that, again, as I said, that in March, the Fed adopted a very dovish stand in monetary policy. And so basically, the Fed is on hold. And then you also see other central banks, such as People's Bank of China, PBOC, adopt the outright easing approach. And then with ECB and the BOJ, Bank of Japan, and the European Central Bank, they continue to be accommodative. So which I think the monetary policy, we are seeing another round of globally synchronized central bank action to stimulate the economy. So with that in place, I believe the monetary policy risk is somewhat abated. So we talk about the economy, the major risks. And overall, we believe that the domestic risk in the U.S. is quite manageable. What can really upset or cause concern is externalities, part of the geopolitical risk, and the other one is how the trade disputes will be resolved. So at least in the near term, I see the risk to the economy and to our portfolio. So we talk about the economy. Now let's say that, that is $362 billion. That's the AUM of our portfolio today. If we say that's where the $362 billion question, to know which part of the economic cycle we are on, then how does that translate into the portfolio performance or capital markets? That's another $3+ trillion question. But with that, I'm happy to report as my first quarter on the job as a new chief investment officer, the market, if you recall, in Q4 last year, particularly around Christmas time, the market was very volatile. The investment sentiment was quite bearish, and since has changed meaningfully since then. The investor sentiment is high. The financial condition has improved significantly. So as a result of that, the risky assets have delivered. All the major stock indices have delivered a double-digit return. S&P 500 delivered close to around 15% of the return. And of course, as the new chief investment officer, anyone cannot claim any credit for the market moves. But on that note, I would like to take a moment and again to recognize the importance, as what I said in the general offsite presentation to you, the importance that luck can play in short-term investment outcomes. And with that, the luck component it gets even better from here. So now let's talk about the performance of our portfolio in Q1, of me being my first quarter being the chief investment officer. So in Q1, our global equity portfolio delivered roughly about 12% of return. Fixed income, the other major asset class, is about 4.5% return. And again, as I said, the luck component cannot get any better than this. If you combine all this together, our portfolio in Q1 delivered exactly 7% of return. Our target rate of return, not one bit more, not one bit less, exactly 7% return. And again, of course, I cannot take any credit for that, but I take that as good omen for the fund. And if you remember my January offsite presentation where I referenced the story from my mom, she was really concerned about what I do for a living because I couldn't predict her portfolio performance with precision. And at least now I can say to her at once, I deliver something with precision that's 7%. I, quote unquote, deliver 7% return exactly on the dot for my very first quarter as a chief investment officer. So with that, I will just pause and take any question that you may have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Brown.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments. It would be helpful to have those in writing. Maybe we can get those. That would be great. You talked about our asset classes are 60-40, and they're at a historical rich point. And I do agree that sometimes when the global equity is high, then the fixed is lower. But you said they're not, and it does not bode very well for returns. So without divulging secrets, can you just kind of help me? Because you said we've got 12% for global equity and 4.5%. Do we know? It just sounds scary when it does not bode well for returns. So
yeah.
Just give me a little hint as to what you mean by that.
Yes. If you recall, at general offset, I mentioned a number of challenges we face in the portfolio. And one of the challenges is the high valuation for asset class. So when the valuation for asset class is high today, it's more likely that the return will be lower in the future. And so with the allocation of our portfolio, with the valuation of the two major asset classes in our portfolio at high levels, and particularly the combination of the portfolio together at high levels, that's why I said that's not bode very well for future return. Simply because the starting point today, the asset class is so rich, you have to pay up for that for the asset. So it does not bode very well for future returns.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have no further questions. Thank you for the report. And 7%, not one less or one more.
Of course, the goal is to achieve more than 7%. If we only deliver 7%, the funded status stayed at 71%. In order to close that gap, it is our aspiration, our goal to earn more than 7%.
Of course.
But my point is, I take it as a good omen for the fund.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you very much. We'll move to item number 6. I don't have any requests to pull any of the information consent items, so we will move to item number 7, which is 7A, the Assembly Bill. Excuse me. So, I'm sorry, you're right. At number 5, I skipped that. Pardon me. Item 5 is approval of the Investment Committee open session meeting minutes. Do I hear a motion? Motion from Jones, second from Hollinger. All right, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now, I had no information consent request to be pulled, so we'll move to item number 7A, Assembly Bill 1320 from Nazarian, divestment from Turkish investment vehicles. Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. Danny Brown, CalPERS team member. AB 1320 by Assembly Member Nazarian is an action item, and it deals with divestment from Turkish investment vehicles. The requirements of this bill would kick in if Congress passes and the President signs a federal law that imposes sanctions on the government of Turkey for failure to officially acknowledge its responsibility for the Armenian genocide. If such action is taken, then CalPERS and CalSTRS would be required to stop making any new or additional investments in an investment vehicle in Turkey that is issued, owned, controlled, or managed by the government of Turkey. The systems would also have 18 months to divest from any such investments. The bill would also automatically sunset on January 1st, 2025, or sooner if a specified federal entity determines that the government of Turkey has officially acknowledged its responsibility of the Armenian genocide. While we certainly appreciate and respect the underlying spirit and purpose of Assembly Member Nazarian's bill as it relates to the Armenian genocide, we are making a recommendation of oppose, like we did last month on the private prison bill. In making this recommendation, staff is trying to take the social and political issues out of the equation, but rather focus on our investment policies that prefer constructive engagement as a way to change behavior. We also want to ensure that our investment office has a full set of investment opportunities to hit their 7% target. And with that, that ends my comments, and happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move approval.
Second.
All right, we have a motion on the floor, and let's see. Okay, Treasurer Ma seconded the motion. Want to roll? Well, all right, Ms. Brown seconded the motion. All right, thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor, but we have comments before that. So, Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Brown. I just wanted to ask really quickly. So the bill says that if the United States government ever passes a law that says we need to divest because they haven't, Turkey hasn't admitted to the genocide, then we would have to divest. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, and then I just wanted to make sure I understood this correctly. While you were talking, I was going through it, and I'm not sure I caught this. You said something about that Turkey has acknowledged. Did I miss that? I just heard that, and I'm sorry I missed it.
No, I did not say that, or if I did, I'm sorry. But I said there is I think I might have been referring to the provision that says that if a federal entity states that the government of Turkey has recognized the Armenian genocide, then this bill would sunset.
Got it. Okay, and we're taking an opposed position, even though it would not impact us unless the United States government would pass something, correct? And
well, I mean, that is staff's recommendation to oppose, regardless of that requirement, just over the overall concerns with divestment bills.
just because of divestment bills?
Yes.
Not necessarily over any underlying reason? Okay, so I just think it's kind of a little odd that we're opposing a bill that won't even go into effect, especially under this administration. We know that for a fact. Is there a way we can get to a neutral? Can I make a motion to amend?
If you make a motion, I'll second it.
Can I make a motion to amend to a neutral position?
Well, you can make a substitute motion.
Substitute motion?
That require a second.
I'll second.
All right. Motion from Taylor, second from Rubikava. Let's continue the conversation. So that's the motion on the floor, is to take a neutral position. Treasurer Ma.
Thank you. Having been in the Assembly before, I have actually co-authored divestment bills, and we had a very robust conversation in CalPERS about the Bonta bill, for example. And I understand, we have a fiduciary hat over here, but like the Bonta bill, he did put a provision in that would allow us as CalPERS members to put on our fiduciary hat, given if he gets that bill to the governor's desk and signed. So I abstained from that vote in CalSTRS. Similarly, I believe this bill also has a provision that it requires the federal government to act. I'm going to also abstain on taking a position here today to be consistent.
Okay. Thank you, Treasurer Ma. Mr. Perez.
Thank you. This isn't so much about the bill. The intent of the bill absolutely is to get Turkey to recognize what they've done, and shame on them. But we need to support staff and take the politics and social issues out of CalPERS. CalPERS simply is a retirement fund, plain and simple.
Okay, I see no further requests to speak. We have a motion on the floor to take a neutral position. And I've been requested to do a roll call. We'll do an electronic vote. So if you'll set up the board for that. This is on the substitute motion to take a neutral position, which has been moved and seconded. So please vote. All right. Motion fails. Yep. I think the motion still fails. All right. So the motion on the floor now, if we'll clear the board, the motion on the floor is to support the staff position, to take an opposed position on the bill. Can you clear that board so we can? You did? Oh, everybody voted pretty fast. No, that's not, it's not cleared. Let's start over. All right, now if you'll, everyone can vote. All right, motion passes. All right, we'll move to item number 8, the information agenda item on total fund. 8A, review of private equity co-investments. Ben Meng and Sarah Core.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Ben Meng, Chief Investment Officer. I'm here today joined by Sarah Cole, our interim Managing Investment Director of Private Equity. So as you recall that when we were reviewing the proposed 2 additions to our private equity business model, namely Pillar 3 and Pillar 4, we were approached with a number of questions by our stakeholder groups. And one of the questions was regarding the co-investment activities in private equity as part of the Pillar 2, our existing business model. And in February, Investment Committee, the chair directed the staff to develop a review of co-investment activities in private equity. So today, Sarah and I are here to report to you the preliminary findings of that study. And with that, so in this morning session, we will address 4 questions. First is the what. What's the question? What is co-investment? And the second question is how. What are the different approaches to co-investment? Sorry, what is the co-investment in private equity? The second question is how to approach co-investment investing in private equity. And the third question is why. Why co-investment from both limited partners perspective, which is us, as well as general partners perspective, which is the general partner, the private equity fund managers. And then the last question we would like to address is the current state of the co-investment market in private equity. So the first question is what? What is co-investment in private equity? So before we answer that question, let's do a quick review of what we are doing now. In the majority of our private equity investment are done via funds. So that is the what called the Pillar 2, the main part of the Pillar 2. So in the fund, which is the top diagram, depicts the mechanism of the fund investment. So we as the investor or limited partner is the box on the left, the gray box. So we invest in a legal entity, let's call the partnership of the fund. And then that legal entity hires the general partner, which is the private equity manager, the general partner, to go out and source potential investment deals or the portfolio companies. That's one on the right. And then the partnership will invest in that company. So that's currently the majority of our private equity investment are done through a commingled fund, the top diagram. And in the commingled fund structure, the general partners or investors like us, we have very little say in terms of investment decisions. We have very little control in terms of portfolio construction, when, what to buy, and how much. Then the bottom diagram is the co-investment. As you can see, we as an investor on the left, the gray box, in addition to the fund investment into the portfolio companies, which is the box on the right, in addition to the fund investment, we also invest directly into the portfolio company. That's the line, the solid black line in the bottom. We also invest in the portfolio company directly alongside the general partners. And when we invest in the co-investment, when we engage in co-investment activities, we do have some distraction in terms of when, how much, and what to put into the portfolio. So that is the basic difference between the fund investment and the co-investment. So we'll be more engaged, participating in the investment decision making process. So this answers the question, what is co-investment activity in private equity? Now the second question is the how. What are the current approaches to co-investment activities? So broadly speaking, there are 3 different approaches to co-investment activities. It comes with a different level of execution complexity, as well as time required on the staff. So as you can see on this chart, the x-axis is the execution complexity. So there are 3 levels of them: syndicated, co-underwriting, and the co-sponsor or co-lead. Then the y-axis is the time required, the staff time required. So as you can see in the lower left part of the chart, that is the syndicated approach. And in the syndicated approach means that the LP or the investor like us, we do not get involved in the investment until after the GPs has the agreement to buy a portfolio company has been signed by the GPs. So LP does not get involved until the purchase agreement is signed by the GPs already. So that is, and that requires a minimum amount of execution complexity and very short time turnaround as well, because so late in the decision-making process. When GP go out, they sign the agreement to buy a company first, then they turn around to syndicate out a piece of the equity to selected investors as a co-investment. So this is the lowest, at least on the left part of the chart. And then on the other end of the extreme, which is the top right part of the chart, where you can co-investors can engage in co-investment activities much early on. So that's what we call co-sponsor and co-lead. And naturally, it comes with a higher execution complexity and much more requirement on the staff's time, expertise, and the internal decision-making governance. So this is on the right, and on the co-lead, co-sponsor, there are times that the co-investors like LP, like us, are involved even before the deal is identified. So it means that the co-investor LP is involved as early as in the deal sourcing stage. So it can be very early on. Then there's also the middle approach, which is the co-underwritten approach. This is that the LPs, the investors, do not get involved until after the deal is identified, but before the purchase agreement is signed. So that is the middle approach. And as part of this exercise, we approached about 10 of our large global peers who all are actively engaging in co-investment activities. And all these global peers, large global peers, they all started their co-investment activity in the lower left part of the chart, the syndicated approach. And after years of experience, in many cases more than a decade of experience, one of them has migrated into the middle with the co-underwriting, and the 3 of them has evolved into all the way to the right, the top right, which is the co-sponsor. It is interesting to note that one of the 3 who has evolved into the most aggressive or most level engagement in co-investment activity, one of them actually is migrating backward toward the middle approach after realizing the challenge they face in terms of bringing all the expertise in-house after years of trying in syndicated and co-underwriting approach. So just co-investment activity is relatively new, probably is more a phenomena of the past decade. So that's the evolution of our global peers. So this answers the how question. What are the different approaches to co-investment activities? And now let's talk about why. Why do people do co-investment? What is the LP's perspective? So first of all, LPs do co-investment largely because of a potential enhanced return, and mainly because of lower overall fees. So in co-investment, unlike in funds, in co-investment, LPs like us normally do not have to pay any fee, no carry. So the saving of the fee and the carry alone can, everything else being equal, will help us to increase the total portfolio net return. The other benefit LPs see in co-investment activity is really to additional mean to increase capital deployment to private equity, the best performing asset class in our portfolio. As I said, I mentioned earlier on that co-investment activity also give investors like us greater control over when, what, and how much to invest to put into the portfolio, so that we can better control in portfolio construction in terms of geographic diversification, sector diversification, vintage year diversification, and then general partners diversification. So through co-investment, we'll gain some more control of portfolio construction. And then last but not least, through co-investment, LPs will have an opportunity to strengthen the relationship with our core GPs. And by working alongside them, we can learn, we can gain deeper understanding of their team, their approach, their investment philosophy and strategy, their strengths and weakness. And this deeper understanding of the general partners comes with two added benefits. One is that when we select managers for our pillar 2 of the private equity business, which is currently the cornerstone of our private equity portfolio, the deeper understanding of our general partners will help us to select better general partners in our portfolio. And in addition, by working alongside with general partners, we can gain the knowledge, the industry best practice, and the investment knowledge, and with the hope that gradually we can bring that expertise and knowledge in-house. So we see twofolds of benefits by working closely with core general partners. So this is why the benefits that LPs, limited partner investors like us, see in co-investment activities. But also there are risks to LPs as well in co-investment. First risk is co-investment can be very resource intensive. As you saw in the previous slide, the different level of engagement by LPs, from syndicated, that's the lowest level of engagement, all the way to the co-lead and co-sponsor, that is the highest level of engagement from LPs. So it can be very resource intensive. And also co-investment opportunities usually requires a much quicker turnaround for approval, which can impose challenges for the internal decision-making governance model. We also see risks in portfolio construction. Inconsistent or uneven approach to co-investment can lead to suboptimal portfolio constructions. We'll elaborate on this point later this afternoon. Also, co-investment can lead to a more concentrated portfolio, because as you see, the co-investment, it is in addition to the fund investment, we add more equity check to the portfolio company. So that means that we are increasing concentration to a few names in our portfolio. This risk can be mitigated depending on our approach to co-investment. And concentration is not all bad. As I said, again, in general offset, there's what we call the rational concentration. So you concentrate your portfolio position in proportion to your conviction level. The other potential risk people talk a lot is the concerns of a possible adverse selection. So what we mean by adverse selections here is that what are the motives for the general partner to offer co-investment opportunities to LPs like us? Do they intentionally hold back, more attractive deals for themselves and perhaps only offer potentially less attractive deals to general partners? Recent studies as well as our own experience dispute this. So we'll dedicate a slide later just on this topic, the risk of adverse selection. And then the last but definitely not least risk is highline risk. So when we invest in a portfolio company in the fund structure, we actually invest in the fund, and then the fund go out to buy the company. So we're kind of isolated a little bit from the portfolio company directly. But now as a co-investment, we are one step closer to the portfolio company. And as a public agency, we are very acutely aware of the highline risk. So this co-investment activity, because we are one step closer to the portfolio company we own, can create more highline risk for us. So this is the LP's perspective. Why co-investment? We know everything in the society, in the capital market, it takes two to tango. So the past rapid growth in co-investment activities are the results of both the increasing demand by investors like us, as well as the supply of co-investment activities by the general partners. So now let's take a look at why general partners provide co-investment activities. For one, is really to increase their competitiveness in large deal size, the market segment. As we know that in private equity, the larger the company, the larger the equity check, the less competition is there. But in the traditional fund investment, usually each fund comes with a portfolio construction or investment policy, and that policy states normally put a cap on how much the fund can invest in one portfolio company. So there's a limitation. So that limitation naturally limits how large the portfolio company the fund can go out to buy. However, now with the co-investors available, the GPs can go up on the size of the portfolio company without having to violate the portfolio construction policy, because any extra beyond and above the risk limitation, they can offer that as a co-investment to co-investors. So the co-investment activity really helps GPs to increase their competitiveness in the larger part for the market segment. And that capability also will help them to increase their capability in raising primary funds. The second benefit that GPs see is really to enhance their relationship with existing LPs by offering favorable economic terms and more attractive co-investment activities to selected limited partners, investors like us. So this is the other benefit that GPs see in co-investment, and that's why they offer co-investment activities. And then when GP, as we said, that co-investment activities in hot demand, more and more LPs want more and more of co-investment. So when GPs decide whom to offer the co-investment activities to, what are their considerations? So normally GP have the following three considerations when deciding on whom to offer the co-investment activities. First is they look for LPs who have had significant co-investment experience and track record and proven capability. Remember, they need a quick turnaround decision from LPs. Sometimes or many times, this deal is already signed. The GPs already signed the deal to buy the company, and they have only a short window of time to turn around to syndicate the equity piece check to selected LPs. So they need to know that your LP, you can deliver on your part. They're also looking for the speed of decision making. In the syndicated case, normally it's about 20 days. You had to turn around to say whether you want the deal or not. So the speed, can you make a quick decision or not? Have you managed co-investment in a portfolio before? And then recently is a very interesting development in the marketplace. When GP offer co-investment activities to co-investors or LPs, they also consider whether the co-investor, the LP like us, can add other values. So in addition to financial capitals, they're looking the co-investors to offer. They're also looking for co-investors who can add other values. What we mean by other values, so there are two examples just announced in the past months or in the recent weeks, actually. One is Valor Equity Partner, is a private equity fund manager focused on early stage food and retail. And they recently announced a partnership. They offer co-investment activities, co-investment opportunities to Starbucks. And from the press release, you can see that it really is a very good marriage. So Starbucks being offered as a co-investor in the deal, Starbucks can really accelerate its understanding of the new trend in food and retail. But on the flip side, the GP, really the Valor Equity Partners, they really benefit from the knowledge of Starbucks knowledge in retail, as well as the mass distribution channel that Starbucks has. So you see in this case, the Valor Equity Partners as a GP offer the co-investment opportunity to Starbucks for value added. In addition to financial capital, it's for the value added to the deal. And the other example recently announced is really the ES network, the content distribution network. In the recent transaction, they teamed up with Amazon. And they hope that they can benefit from, again, the massive membership and distribution channel that Amazon can offer to the deal. So again, that's where this is a relatively recent phenomena. The GPs, when they decide whom to offer co-investment opportunities to, in addition to the ability of managing co-investment and the speed of decision making, they're also looking for value add from other either operation or marketing, however you can bring to the table. So that is GP's perspective. Now I would like to spend the next couple of minutes on the current state of the last question, the current state of the co-investment in private equity. So simply put, demand for co-investment opportunities from LPs community outstrips supply by GPs. In 2017, the estimated co-investment market share, market size by Cambridge Associates is about $60 billion. And according to a survey last year, 72% of large investors like us have an active co-investment program, and is up from 60% in the previous year. So LPs, demand from LPs, it is our forecast will continue to grow. And then the supply from the GPs is likely to continue to grow as well. So approximately 60% of GPs surveyed by Preqin offer co-investments, and estimated to be offered on 6% of all completed transactions. The percentage will be higher for buyout and lower for VC, but on average will be 6%. And again, from our conversation with our global peers at LPs and GPs, and with the industry experts, the syndicated approach, which is on the lower left part of the chart, the least level of execution complexity and the least amount of time required on the staff, that remain to be the most common approach by investors to approach co-investment. Okay, so now as I said that, we'll dedicate one slide on the potential adverse selection. What are the motives for GP to offer co-investment opportunities? Do they hold back the better deals and offer only the potential less attractive deals to LP as a co-investment opportunities? So there are two well-known scholarly articles with opposing views. One is the Fan and et al. First published in 2014, finalized in 2015, which found evidence of adverse selection. And then 3 years later, Brown et al. Paper in first published in 2017 and finalized in 2018, found no evidence of adverse selection. The key difference between these two articles, which we provided the link to the board, the key difference between these two articles are really in the source of data, the size of the sample, and the representativeness of the sample, the data sample, as well as the study methodology. The later study, Brown et al. 2018, used a much larger data size, more representative data size, and slightly better study methodology. So naturally will lead to more solid conclusions, which conclude that there is no evidence of adverse selection, which is consistent with our own experience, which we will elaborate later this afternoon. And that finding that there is no adverse selection is also consistent with well-respected private equity industry consultants' findings such as Cambridge Associates, Preqin, and Stepstone. So with that, I would conclude. Okay, I guess with that, I have to pause and answer questions since this clicker doesn't work anymore. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much. Ms. Brown.
Thank you for that presentation, Ben. I've been, since I've gotten on the board, I've been talking about why aren't we doing more co-investments, or what co-investments are we doing? And I think we'll be talking about that later in closed sessions. And you sort of answered my first question on page 10, which is these two studies by Fang and Braun talk about the difference in data. And of course, my note in my iPad is here is, well, what's our own data show us? And we're going to discuss that in closed session,
yes,
correct? Okay.
We'll conduct in closed session, and our own data, I have to say, our sample size is larger than the first study, the Fan at all. So that again just shows the lack of transparency in the private equity as an asset class. Data is the challenge. There's no shortage of smart people, a scholar can analyze anything, but the challenge is lack of data.
Right, and I believe we have that data in our, is it called PERS or PARS system? Is that where we have that data?
I'll defer to Sarah.
Great.
We
And I've
have,
only heard about PERS. I haven't actually seen it. Maybe we could get that at some point in time, some information on that.
So the PERS system has information on all of CalPERS investments and whether they're co-investments or commingled funds or separate accounts.
And so that's where you're pulling our data set from, that
Some of it's from there and some of it's received directly from the general partners.
Great. And then going back to slide 6, on adverse selection, so this is again the same type of thing. I would agree that you would sort of think that the general partners wouldn't necessarily give the limited partner the good co-investments, but again, they might need to in order to generate more money because they might be limited by their agreement. And also, an LP will take a co-investment, but if we're always on the short end, we're not going to continue to do co-investments. So there's a symbiotic relationship between the GP and LP and co-investments. And I just like to say that I really hope we step this up, we get the consultant we need in here to help us, and we start moving on this. If we first need to do it on the low end of the XY axis, that's fine, but hopefully we get to the part where we can get on the, where we're doing a lot of the work ourselves in-house. That's what I'm hoping for, and we can get the benefit of the returns, because my knowledge is that when we co-invest alongside with our private equity investments, because we don't pay fees or carry, it actually helps the overall return for that portfolio, and I'm hoping we get there. Thank you.
Yeah, so that was a discussion this afternoon. But back to your point on adverse selection, I agree with you. If you think about the general partners' motives, why do they offer co-investment to selected limited partners like us? One is that the ticket size is too big, so they need financial capital. And the other one is that they are trying to enhance the relationship with selected limited partners, so they wouldn't want to ruin the relationship. And their business is really to raise follow-on fund, exactly as you point out, that if the limited partner find out they always hold the shorter end of the stick, you wouldn't reinvest with them anymore.
Well, let's hope that the GPs start looking to us to do more co-investments. That's my hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Controller Yee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. This is really excellent in terms of just going in, knowing what the risks are, and identifying those. As you know, I've placed a pretty good premium on governance, and I wanted to just ask a question as to whether CalPERS will have greater governance rights in a co-investment structure. If you could comment.
Yes and no, but generally speaking, yes. So let me go back to this.
Yeah.
So once you become a co-investor, the bottom half of the diagram, no matter the level of engagement, either the lowest level from syndicated to the highest level co-lead, will have more information to the portfolio company, because we are more direct ownership of the portfolio company now. So we'll have more information, more transparency. And in terms of the governance, if we're all the way on the right, say co-sponsor and co-lead, most likely it'll come with the board seat at the portfolio company level. But that's a requirement on us, that we have to be ready and willing to sit on the board and be value add on the board of portfolio companies, and we'll have more influence on the governance. So exactly, we'll have more control on the investment and on the governance and information as well.
Okay, good, good. That's what I thought, just kind of syncing up those two. That's great. And then, with respect to the risks that were identified, adverse selection, I understand certainly the conclusion there. How do you intend to mitigate portfolio concentration?
So I plan to discuss that in the afternoon, because that touch upon our strategy forward.
All right. Yeah, that's fine. And then just a question with respect to the speed, I guess. How confident are you that your due diligence process can meet the requirement that GPs are seeking in terms of execution on opportunities quickly?
So again, that's another topic this afternoon.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Hollinger.
Thank you. Ben, I really appreciate this, and I think one of the challenges going forward that we faced historically is how do you get to scale? How do we increase our allocation to private equity? And I think co-investment provides us with that opportunity. So I'm very supportive along with my colleague, Ms. Brown. A couple of questions. When I was at and I met with the Canadian pensions who are doing direct and co-investment deals, they can do that turnaround or give a yes or no immediately. And if this is a question for later, is there something, are we able to do that, or is there something you need from the board to be able to execute on that?
Yeah, currently we cannot, so that's what we intend to bring up this afternoon, what we would need from this board.
Okay, because that was because I think historically probably that's prevented us, and so I just want to make sure that we would give you the tools you need to move forward.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Miller.
Yeah, again, thank you. This presentation is very well crafted, and I think it provides me with a good example and food for thought for some of the other work we're doing on improving board materials. So thank you for that right off the bat. And to kind of piggyback on Ms. Hondra's comment, and I know we'll probably get into more detail later, but it seems to me that the co-investment space is going to be important moving forward, and kind of my mantra I keep coming back to is, I'm looking forward to seeing more and more about how this really aligns with this whole concept of kind of strategic workforce and talent flow management, and how it integrates with our budget process and everything. And I know we'll get more into detail, but that's certainly, looking as a long-term investor with long-term strategies, we've got to build that in and cook it in from the get-go. So I'll be looking forward to hearing more from you on this subject as we move along. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo my colleagues' outstanding presentation. Appreciate the clarity that's embodied in the presentation. And my question goes to the horizon, the timeline for these two types of investments, the fund versus the co-investment. And one of the mitigating issues that we've talked about is this turnover in terms of private equity investment. It's a short term, 5, 7, maybe even 10 years, that doesn't align with our liabilities that are 40, 50, 60 years out. So my question is, looking at the co-investment, while we could have already invested in the partnership, but going around in the co-investment, can that be a longer horizon than the partnership, or does it have to be the same?
It has to be the same. The current structure has to be the same, so the portfolio company exit at the same time. So as a co-investment, current structure, we cannot hold our co-investment piece for longer. So the answer is no, we cannot do that yet.
So that explains we have to find another vehicle to get that long-term.
Yes, exactly. So that's a beautiful.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ms. Brown.
Thank you. My question's for Sarah. Are we doing any co-investments now?
We can talk about that in closed session, but the short answer is we're not currently doing any co-investing.
Thank you.
Yeah, and this afternoon I'll give you a comprehensive review of the timeline history of our own history.
Great. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, I see no further requests to speak. I want to thank you for this presentation. I mean, it's very clear that we are pursuing an all-of-the-above strategy, and that co-investments are a critical piece to this. And I think I speak on behalf of all the board members that we're going to look forward to our conversation in closed session where we can dig in more details.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So we move, I think we're finished with this item. We move to item number 9, summary of committee direction.
I noted none.
Okay.
Yeah.
Didn't have any. All right. So we'll move to public comment. And I have one request to speak, Mr. Soares. And you'll have 3 minutes. And
that's fine. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Again, I'm David Soares. I'm on the board of the Retired Public Employees Association. I'm a retired prosecutor. And I just wanted to follow up on my comments at the last meeting because I'm very concerned about the way that closed session is being used. And I just want to remind the CalPERS board as individuals of Section 11-120 of the California Government Code. That is the preference for open government in the state of California. And I'm also, I want to remind the board to take a look at CalSTR's policy about closed session, and especially the 11-126 Government Code investment rule. CalSTR's policy is, with regard to investment decisions, the board shall consider most investment matters in open session unless such consideration would jeopardize execution of the investment or cause harm to the value of the investment. What I don't want CalPERS to do is obviously expose negotiations where outsiders can front-run CalPERS investments. That's not what I'm talking about. What I am talking about is the governance issue. This agency has had problems with governance. We all know, especially when high fees are sloshing around, that we have had problems at CalPERS with kickbacks even to a former CEO. That kind of money is very dangerous. And so I want to encourage the board as individuals. Controller Yee had a really excellent idea that she mentioned at the last investment committee meeting, that this board really needs independent outside counsel for advice who do not report to the CEO, but rather report to the board, and who are ethically bound to give the board good advice. The other thing that I want to encourage this board, I don't know what you're discussing in closed session, but if you believe that closed session is being violated under the government code, you do have the ability to talk to the state auditor. I know that the state attorney general has not taken an active role for quite a few years in enforcement of the Bagley-Keene open meeting law, but I can tell you from personal experience, I have filed a complaint with the state auditor's office about Bagley-Keene involved in this board a couple years ago, and I had a very good response. And I know that our state auditor, Elaine Howell, is now much more active about investigating and publishing public reports about these issues. And so as individual board members, you're not just here on your own. And I strongly encourage you to engage with the state auditor if you believe that there are issues with open meetings. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments. That concludes the open session agenda. We will adjourn now and go into closed session as soon as the room clears. Thank you very much.